Hello, and welcome to another episode of Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom, where we explore the hidden corners of health research and figure out just how much scientists can complicate a perfectly good brain cell. I'm Ethan Foster, your friendly neighborhood observer of all things baffling in modern life.
And I'm Alara Sky, resident comedic contrarian, here to ask the questions you never knew you had and hand out witty commentary in spades. We're thrilled you're tuning in to learn, and possibly unlearn, what you thought you knew about Alzheimer's research.
Today we're discussing something that rattled the scientific community, a 2006 landmark Alzheimer's study that was recently retracted, as in, yanked off the shelves, the academic equivalent of, "We're sorry we messed up. Actually, we're not sure how this got published in the first place."
Right. And when a journal as renowned as Nature says, "You know what, we might have goofed," you know it's serious. This study introduced a specific form of amyloid beta protein called AB*56. But don't worry, I won't be making you memorize that. It was supposed to be the smoking gun in Alzheimer's. Then someone noticed the smoke was more like Photoshop.
Exactly. After nearly 2 decades of building entire research empires on that supposed protein, a forensic analysis found that key images were manipulated, which is science speak for somebody spliced, diced, and maybe got a little too creative in the lab.
The best part is, scientists were all chasing this A-beta*56 protein, like it was the holy grail of Alzheimer's cures. Money poured in. Grants were won. Other potential causes, like metabolic dysfunction and inflammation, got an apathetic wave. And now we're finding out this star protein might not even exist. That's like spending years hunting for Bigfoot, only to realize the footprints were suspiciously close to the costume shop in the next town over.
We're not here to say Bigfoot definitely doesn't exist, but if you see fuzzy photos that look suspiciously like your Uncle Fred in a gorilla suit, you might not want to dedicate your entire life savings to that particular quest. That's basically what happened in Alzheimer's research. Everyone got fixated on a beta*56, ignoring all the other plausible theories.
And to think, billions of dollars, gone. It's the biggest financial whoopsie this side of cartoon characters who slip on banana peels. And we all know who pays the ultimate price: patients and families. Picture someone caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's while waiting for a wonder drug that's been stuck in an imaginary protein spiral for nearly 20 years.
Meanwhile, the University of Minnesota, where a big portion of this research was done, apparently carried out an internal review. They concluded that nothing was amiss, sort of like investigating a cookie heist when you have chocolate smeared all over your own lips.
Absolutely. You can almost hear them. We looked into the matter. We're fairly certain our lab coats are pristine. Everyone, please move along. And that's the problem. Institutions reviewing themselves can be just a tad conflicted, kind of like assigning your pet fox to keep an eye on the hen house.
Another interesting detail, the study's senior author eventually agreed to retract it, but she insists the main conclusions remain valid, which is a little like saying, sure, we tampered with images, but trust us, the message is still rock solid. That's not exactly going to inspire confidence.
And the confusion keeps going. A big chunk of the scientific field was based on these flawed images. Over 2,300 scholarly articles cited that 2006 paper, and many labs tried to replicate the findings. They either failed, or their results were questionable at best. Yet, somehow, the original paper stood tall for nearly 2 decades, unstoppable as a movie villain who just refuses to die.
This begs the question, if something as monumental as Alzheimer's research can be derailed by doctored images for so long, what else might be slipping past us? Isn't that a nice, heartwarming question to chew on with your morning coffee?
Precisely. That's the real kicker. If we can't trust the bedrock of Alzheimer's research, are there other faults in the scientific canyon? It's like hearing that your favorite bakery's signature bread has been using sawdust as a secret ingredient. Suddenly, you wonder if the muffins and cookies are safe too.
And that leads us to a broader point, the importance of questioning the source, not in a conspiratorial, everything is a lie way, but in a, maybe we should double-check these so-called facts manner. We're not telling you to distrust all scientists. We're just politely suggesting we keep an eye out for the occasional rotten apple.
Also, let's talk about how this fiasco distracted so many researchers from other promising studies. Instead of investigating metabolic dysfunction, chronic inflammation, or even the role of certain dietary factors in Alzheimer's, money got funneled into the amyloid plaque pipeline. That pipeline turned into a pot of gold for some labs. And who can blame them? If all the grants are earmarked for the amyloid approach, you follow the money if you want to keep your lab's lights on.
Meanwhile, the biggest losers are patients. They're stuck with treatments that have repeatedly bombed in clinical trials. Families hang on to hope that each new drug with breakthrough plastered all over the media might do something, only to find out the results are underwhelming. If a year's supply of that medication costs a small fortune, that's a pretty hefty heartbreak.
The phenomenon also shows that sensational findings can overshadow more humble but legitimate lines of inquiry. When a groundbreaking discovery is put on a pedestal, it sometimes stays there unchallenged. No one wants to be the scientist who says, "I'm sorry, but are we sure these images aren't Photoshop illusions?" Because that might jeopardize your career. And so the cycle continues, until one day, someone brave like Matthew Schrag steps in with a big red pen to mark all the suspicious stuff.
Exactly. And that's when you realize, wait a minute, the emperor might not be wearing any clothes. Some journals recognize the red flags. But let's face it, the retraction process isn't lightning fast. It's more like glacially slow, giving labs time to do internal investigations that mysteriously conclude nothing to see here. And we can all guess why. Prestige, reputations, money. It's amazing what gets in the way of simply telling the truth.
Let's shift gears a little. Now that we've dissected this fiasco, how can our listeners protect themselves from misinformation? Because, let's be honest, we can't all read every scientific paper with a magnifying glass looking for doctored images.
Let's start with a few suggestions. First, ask who funded the research. If a big pharmaceutical company that's itching for a new drug discovery funded the study, that doesn't automatically mean the science is corrupt, but let's just say it's worth a second look. Follow the money. People rarely write checks out of pure goodwill.
Another handy rule: if a claim sounds too good to be true, or too convenient for a particular drug or product, your eyebrows should start climbing upward. Real science is messy, and results are rarely neat. When findings fit perfectly with a major financial incentive, well, coincidence can happen, but we might do well to be vigilant.
Precisely. Also, be cautious when the headlines are screaming about the next miracle fix. One of my personal favorites is, "Scientist discovers chocolate cures everything." Sure, I wish that was true, but a quick read of the study might reveal that the participants were a grand total of 5 people, all of whom were apparently bored graduate students.
If you really want to be thorough, read the actual research. Yes, it's about as thrilling as reading a phone book from 1985, but you can often spot disclaimers or methodological holes that the mainstream media's articles fail to mention. And if you can't read the entire paper, at least look for critical responses from the scientific community.
And finally, keep in mind that many therapies that actually help with Alzheimer's or other chronic issues might not come from a fancy new drug. For instance, lifestyle interventions, diet changes, or environmental factors can play a huge role. But these are not as glamorous as unveiling the next multi-billion-dollar pill.
Speaking of lifestyle, let's pivot to some of those brain-supporting strategies. Because if we're not pinning all our hopes on these amyloid-targeting drugs, we might as well shift our attention to what we can do day to day. Let's start with diet.
When it comes to feeding your brain, consider stepping away from heavily processed foods that list more unpronounceable chemicals than actual ingredients. Lean more toward high-quality proteins, plenty of nutrients, and watch out for sneaky seed oils. These oils have become the boogeyman for many health-conscious folks. The logic is that they can promote inflammation, which is the last thing your brain needs.
And if you're thinking, these seed oils are in everything from salad dressings to my favorite brand of cookies, that's part of the problem. Sometimes, embracing simpler, more whole foods means reading labels like you're Sherlock Holmes, but your neurons might thank you later.
Another important factor is your mitochondria. These are the little energy factories in your cells. They're basically the unsung heroes that keep us upright and breathing. Poor mitochondrial health can be a culprit in neurodegenerative diseases, so protecting your brain often means giving these minuscule power plants some TLC.
Exactly. That might mean daily sunlight. Who knew the star at the center of our solar system was so beneficial? And being mindful of how certain fats or oils might hamper mitochondrial function. It might also include avoiding extremes. Crash dieting or skipping meals for days on end can sometimes stress your system out. Metabolism is tricky business. You want to support it, not tie it up in knots.
Also, let's not forget about exposure to environmental toxins. It's amazing how many we encounter, from plastics to heavy metals. They're like uninvited guests sneaking into your house and messing up your furniture. Minimizing those exposures can lighten the toxic load on your brain.
Plus, if you're so inclined, you could incorporate certain supportive compounds under professional guidance, though that's more specialized territory. The broader point is that basic, foundational health practices, like a good diet, moderate exercise, adequate sleep, can be a game changer for your mind. You don't necessarily need a miracle molecule discovered in a lab where they forgot to mention they edited the images.
Funny how it often comes back to simple lifestyle tweaks. Meanwhile, for 20 years, a chunk of the Alzheimer's research community has been chasing a phantom protein. That's the comedic tragedy of it all. We prefer something that sounds high-tech or futuristic, but sometimes the best answers are practical, even boring. Eat real food and get sunlight doesn't roll off the marketing tongue quite like cutting-edge protein therapy.
The irony is, if the scientific community had distributed some of that $287 million spent annually on amyloid-related research on investigating metabolic or immune factors, who knows where we'd be? Possibly in a better place, with more clarity about how to approach Alzheimer's. But at least now the jig is up, and hopefully more balanced, multi-pronged approaches will see the light of day.
We can hope. Though, given how long it took to retract this single paper, you have to wonder how many other questionable studies might still be lurking. But let's stay optimistic. These exposures can serve as a wake-up call, not just for the powers that be in research, but for all of us. We're the consumers of this information. We get to shape demand, If we insist on higher standards, eventually the system has to respond.
Right on. And part of that means staying curious, reading up, asking questions. If enough people say, hey, can you show us the data behind that? Or, are you sure these images aren't manipulated? We can foster an environment of accountability. Granted, that might not sound as fun as building a rocket to Mars, but trust me, we'll get better mileage out of our brains than a rocket if we keep them healthy.
So, to sum up, a landmark Alzheimer's study got retracted for faking data, which means we've spent years and billions chasing a possibly non-existent protein. Now's a good time to reevaluate everything, from how we fund research to how we think about treating neurodegenerative diseases. A cameo appearance from honesty and transparency is long overdue in the scientific realm.
Real solutions might revolve around focusing on your body's innate power through food, light, exercise, stress reduction, and targeted interventions that don't rely on possibly spliced images. Maybe your grandmother's advice to eat your vegetables and go outside to play was more advanced than all those tampered lab photos combined.
Well, Grandma always knows best, especially when we discover that the biggest breakthroughs might just be the simplest truths we overlooked. Thank you, dear listeners, for joining us on Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom. We hope this episode encourages you to question, explore, and laugh a bit along the way.
Indeed. Keep that inquisitive spark alive. And don't forget, next time you see something touted as groundbreaking, give it a quick sniff test. If it smells off, there might be a reason. We'll be here to help you sniff it out and to poke fun at it too.
That's all for today's conversation. We'll catch you next time, where we'll likely tackle another subject that somehow manages to be simultaneously alarming and hilarious. Until then, keep your brain healthy, your wit sharp, and your sense of humor even sharper.
Stay curious, stay skeptical, and above all, stay well. See you next time on Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe now and click the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.